Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we're diving into one of the most talked about missing person cases in the country, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. More than 4 months ago, she vanished from her home, and investigators are still searching for answers. Tonight, we'll break down the latest developments, including the recent search efforts in Mexico, the ongoing DNA testing, the evidence that has been released to the public, and perhaps more importantly, the evidence that hasn't. Joining me is my brother and co-author, Dr. Brian Santana. Together, we'll examine what we know, what we don't know, and where this investigation is heading. Dr. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here. It's fun to talk about some of these cases that are getting a lot of, this one's revving up again. It seems like it's been in the news for a long time. You mentioned the 4 months. And so I feel like this is one of those that hasn't really gone away. And there's been a lot of mixed results about kind of what continues to kind of come forward, whether it's useful or not.
And I think that is what I'm seeing is that 4 months have gone by. And we went from having literally thousands of people working on this case, to include FBI agents from all over. And they had a lot. It seemed like they had their momentum. They had a picture of the suspect. They had cooperation from the public. And it looked like this was going to be solved and someone would be charged. And it went from that into the investigators had to go on to her cases. And now we've got a core group that's working on it. And it's kind of faded over time. But then recently, there's been this whole Mexico search that's been going on. And that's what drew my attention to it. Because to be honest with you, when I first saw that, I thought, okay, Mexico, there's a lot of bodies that are buried there with cartels near the border and with immigrants who unfortunately don't make it. And I just thought that this was maybe someone taking a needle in the haystack approach to getting a reward for finding her, to be honest. What did you make of it?
Yeah, where you're just kind of hedging your bets, like they're in Mexico near the border.
Exactly.
And yeah, I would
there's
imagine
going to be fat people at a buffet.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's a guess as good as any other. But one of the weird things to me about this case is that it feels like the piece of evidence that does seem significant that has gotten less attention is more recently is that Ring video. And I guess I'm just thinking about with the Delphi case. You remember we had that grainy video that was the man on the bridge, and for more than a year that was on loop online of people analyzing and taking it apart and the FBI using, like NASA scientists to try to clarify the image. Like there was so much discussion of the video. And I guess one of the things that amazes me about this, even allowing for the fact that the perpetrator is wearing a mask and is like well covered, there's not a lot of obvious things indicating the person's identity, but you feel like there would be something, whether it's the gait or something about the dress. And I'm just surprised that video has not been shown over and over again. That it seems like people, at least in the circles that I've been looking at online, they're largely not obsessing over the video like they have in other cases where we have this video evidence, or Liz Barraza, or any of these other cases we've talked about where the videos are not as good of a quality as the one that we have in Nancy Guthrie.
Yeah, the Liz Barraza video was taken from across the street. As well as a obstructed doorbell camera where you can't even see the suspect. And which fascinating case, by the way, if people are not familiar with it. We've done several shows on it. But with this one, we are getting details from the video, or they are releasing details to include that they know where he got his backpack from.
Like Walmart or something. Yeah.
Right. They found several gloves along the way, which is just odd. I've got my own theory on that. But we've also got to take into consideration that the police are not releasing everything they have. When you
Right.
mentioned Delphi, they released a snippet of the video. They did
Yeah.
not release the entire video. I think it was a 3-second loop that
Yeah.
said down the hill.
And they didn't release all the audio either, but we had but the little snippets they did release, there was so much online speculation and discussion. And I guess one of the things that surprised me with this is, I mean, like, how far away is the suspect in this particular video? Like what, like a few feet maybe? Like, we have pretty clear high definition video,
Right.
and it does amaze me that there's not anything in that that can be useful. Whereas in some of the other cases where the video is positioned as being key to solving the case, we really have like blurry, grainy figures where it's like, well, it looks kind of like a Carhartt jacket, or maybe it could be this or that, but like you don't really know. And in this one, like you're saying, they've been able to trace it back to the kind of stores where some of the where some of these were likely bought. And so it almost feels like with some of these leads, I was thinking about this today, that even just, and maybe they're doing this, but just saying like, how popular were the items that were bought from Walmart? They were there. Like, I'm sure they like in that kind of like region, it almost seems like it'd be a better use of your time to try to find every single person that had purchased within a period of time, that than it would be to focus on, let's say, driving to the border in Mexico and looking for a body. I'm not surprised that they found a bunch of bodies that are there. And these things do tend to happen in these border towns. When they go on these big searches, you end up solving a bunch of cases, and usually not the one that you're looking for.
Right. And I was going back through the timeline when the border was being brought up this week. I thought how just logical that scenario is. Like,
Mhm.
how much time would you need to even get to the border? And come to
Right.
find out, it's only about an hour drive from where her house is. So if you go back and look at the timeline,
Mhm.
we know that her garage door the night before she went missing
Mhm.
closes at around 9:50 p.m.
Mhm.
And then at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st is when we start to see, or at least that's the knowledge that we have, that there is a doorbell camera disabled by the suspect.
Mhm.
There may be other footage of him walking around earlier, and I would suspect that there is, because the quality of doorbell that Ring has. I've got one, and I
Mhm.
can open up my phone and scroll through for 24 hours, um, in and it's very detailed, and you can zoom in and whatnot. So I would suspect that they've got more than what they're letting on. But we know that the really important time in my eyes is at
Mhm.
2:28 is when Nancy's pacemaker monitor misses its scheduled transmission, which
Mhm.
means that she's away from her house,
Okay.
is what
Yeah.
we believe that means. And so the family's not alerted till, I mean, a church member it becomes concerned at 11 a.m.
Mhm.
and family members don't get to her house till close to 12.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a lot of time, is what I'm rambling on about.
Yeah.
That if this person was determined to get to the border or get her into Mexico, they could make it a long ways. I mean, they didn't have to just stay right at a border town if that was the end goal.
When you wonder what if this goes back, one of the things that makes this case so complicated is just discerning the motive, and not necessarily the motive like the deep psychological motivation, but we're assuming this was financially motivated. It seems unlikely to be sexually motivated, right, in this case. And so if this was a financially motivated crime, then you also just wonder, well, like, how does the person benefit from just like a what essentially became a hit of like get into the person's house, they're presumably dead, like a few hours later, and buried in Mexico. Like, it sounds like such a weird high risk scenario with someone who is the daughter of a high profile public figure, for the only thing where there's going to be a lot of attention, to for it not to be financially motivated. But all of the information about the financial motive and some of the leads that have come forward more recently, it just all sounds very speculative, and it's really difficult to there's not that clear kind of there's not there it's hard to know which ransom notes were like actual real ransom notes, or what kinds of communication, or what the plan was. There was this tip that came forward from this crypto security company, Certica, which has publicly stated. Now, keep in mind, this is not the FBI. They've publicly stated that they believe Nancy Guthrie's abduction fits a pattern where criminals will target someone who's who's they believe to be wealthy, and that they cited this the $6 million Bitcoin ransom that was originally tied to this case. And there's people that are speculating that this could be the potential fill in some of these gaps where we've long wondered exactly, like, what's the motive here. Well, if the motive is financial, this Bitcoin cryptocurrency thing, that would make sense. But it just feels like a plan that wasn't particularly well thought out, if that was the actual um motive, right? Like, I
And
mean,
I see what
they
you're
would need
saying with that, right?
proof of life. They would need something else, right? Like, you don't kidnap and murder someone then ask for a ransom, right? Like, it just seems like a really
And that's what I see as the issue, is that when you hear about these cases where it is a high profile kidnapping and the end goal is to get money, if this was a cartel or some type of
Mhm.
organized crime group that did it,
Yeah.
they're going to be reaching out to the family and making
Mhm.
demands and giving proof of life, because you don't get paid if you don't have a body.
Right, right.
And you haven't seen that, and it's been 4 months. And so that's why I don't put a lot of weight into this whole crypto idea, because I it doesn't fit the pattern that a kidnapping would go. I think that this is more likely, and this is just my guess,
Mhm.
I think that this may been more of like what Dr. David Hayes was saying. He
Mhm.
said, "You know what? You've got a lot of people in that area that have drug problems, and they break into houses in order to get drugs." And I wonder if maybe this wasn't as planned as people are making out to be.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
guy broke in and then either realized whose house he broke into,
Mhm.
or maybe she offered that information.
Mhm.
There's a lot of what ifs that happen, but I don't feel like this suspect took her far.
Mhm.
And I say that because if you've got a body in your trunk,
Yeah.
and we believe that she was alive when she left the house, and I say that because we know that there's been reports of the blood drops that were
Mhm.
found on her front porch were more consistent with someone like a bloody nose, and not a gushing wound that
Right.
would leave, you know, liters of blood in
Right.
places. These were droplets. So I do believe that she was injured inside the house. But if you've got an older woman too, that's not an ideal kidnapping victim either, because you've
Right.
got to keep this person alive, or
Right.
else they're not worth as much money. And so you want someone young enough that they're low maintenance, not the lady that is, has pills that she has to take every day
Right.
and is fragile.
Right. Maybe has dietary restrictions, or has all sorts of other
Right.
kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that to me, feels like this is a guy whose motive was money. And again, this is speculation on my
Mhm.
part. But if I were to bet, the motive in this was to break into her home. And I think this guy just messed up and just didn't realize
Mhm.
what he got himself into. And then afterwards, he essentially is eliminating the evidence by um, getting rid of her body.
I think that makes sense, as a theory. I do think that it solves one of the issues because I think in a case like this, it's very difficult to know what are you supposed to of the limited evidence that we have access to, what should you place the most attention on? And traditionally, there is a lot of weight that's tied to victimology, and in this case, maybe just the celebrity status of Nancy Guthrie's daughter has outweighed everything else in this case, where people were imagining because her daughter is a public figure, that it has to be somehow tied to that. And so that it becomes a kind of it becomes a thing where, like you were saying, that if you're imagining this is financially motivated, which I think most people agree it's financially motivated, it seems to be financially motivated in some fashion, whether it's I'm getting taking things I can resell or I'm getting drugs or like, I mean, I would think about even like stealing drugs, like as some kind of like financially
Right.
motivated. I don't have the money to buy these drugs, so I'm breaking people's houses and getting drugs or something. Um, if you even if you think about it in that way, um, it's possible that it could be financially motivated and not also tied to Savannah Guthrie, her daughter. So it could be like a mistake, like you said.
Okay, we've got a few comments. So I'm surprised that excuse me. I'm surprised that there's no gas station or streetlight cameras that saw the car. And that is
Me
something
too. Me
that
too. That's a great point.
I would
Mhm.
guess that
Yeah.
they've already done,
Yeah.
but maybe they're not releasing the
That's
information. But then
that's time to
again,
release that video, I think, at this point.
it is.
So
And, when you mentioned Liz Barraza,
yeah, yeah. It's a
the
great
same
point,
thing
Justin,
happened
by the way.
there where
Mhm.
they did a canvas. I've got the reports from that
Mhm.
case where they did a canvas for security cameras at gas stations and businesses and
Mhm.
got nothing. And a lot of times that was because the cameras weren't working,
Mhm.
they were pointing in the wrong direction, and they would have employees that didn't know what they were doing with them. But the other question he had is if it was for ransom, why would you need to make her bleed? I don't think that she was injured. I don't think that the intent was to go in there and injure her. I think
Mhm.
that the intent was to go in and break into her house and steal something valuable.
Mhm.
I think that either A, the suspect did not realize that she was home.
Mhm.
I mean, she's an older person.
For
I'd
sure.
assume that she went to bed sometime close to when that garage door closed. So
Mhm.
the garage door closed at 9:50. Let's say lights are out by 11 o'clock at the latest. This
Yeah.
suspect is coming around. He's
Mhm.
seen at 1:47. So we can assume that he gets there at least a little bit before that, or he's staking the house out. If
Sure.
he doesn't see any lights on, this may have just been as simple as I don't think anyone's home.
Right.
I'm going to remove this doorbell so I don't get caught.
Mhm.
I mean, he's got a ski mask on. He's got his pack. It would be interesting of what is in that pack.
Mhm.
Maybe he did have that roll of duct tape and
Mhm.
some rope, and his intent was to do a kidnapping. But I would guess, especially that we know that his travel route after that was on foot, because other people later saw him walking around that area,
Yeah.
that you break in and you don't realize someone's there and you're trying to control them. This is an old lady that's going to bleed easily. So even if you're not punching her in the face,
Mhm.
she falls down good, she's going to be bleeding.
She's 84 years old.
Right.
So 84 years old, I mean, if any of you have grandparents or anything out there, sometimes even just like bumping into a door can, if you're on blood thinners, can cause like, bruising and slight blood, because we're talking about drops of blood here. So I think producing I think to Justin's point, I think is well taken. And I'm really curious about the other footage that we do have. I'm especially, but I do think it wouldn't take a lot to, like you're saying, Cameron, to produce a few drops of blood. I'm very interested in if in as part of their canvas, if they've gone through, this person seems to have at least some idea of what they're doing. It doesn't look like a professional person doing it, but they've at least have maybe done this similar break-ins before. I'm wondering if they've collected or looked through ring cameras from people in the neighborhood, or asked them to go back, kind of going backwards, and if there was any other kinds of, was this guy always intent on for her or her home? Was he kind of exploring homes in this neighborhood because it's a wealthy suburb? Or is there any video of him kind of just walking around, maybe peering in, looking like scouting out at other homes in the neighborhood at different points in time leading up to this? Or, I would be really curious about that information too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if we do have someone that's kind of meandering through the neighborhood, the thing that I thought about with that backpack too is that, from my experience, sometimes what thieves would do is, in that backpack, they would keep that jacket
Mhm.
and the ski mask. And then that way, if they're just walking around the street, they're in clothes that they're not seen on camera. And so that may have been the reason for the backpack.
Mhm.
I can't You can't tell if that backpack has anything in it, but it's definitely not packed.
Mhm.
And I think that if this person is on foot, especially,
Mhm.
that would be another reason to say that the kidnapping isn't planned.
Right.
Because I say that because, unless he has an accomplice
Mhm.
that's going to pull that car in, how are you getting her out of the residence and away from that area? If
Yeah.
you park down the street, are you dragging an 84-year-old lady? I mean, maybe he did have his car ditched somewhere close,
Right.
or maybe the police do have that information and then they just don't want to share it with us for some reason,
Right.
which I would hope that they would, because we're talking about 4 months. And when you start dwindling down your force, that would lead me to believe that you've lost that momentum, that those leads are not pouring in like they were before.
And I wonder, with these leads, that were pointing them down to Mexico, the one thing, or the border, one thing I think is interesting that we've learned from some recent cases like Gretchen Fleming, I think, is that suppose this was, the goal was not to kill her, like we said, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, for all the, especially if this is financially motivated, and something accidentally happens where she either dies, or there is a situation where the person has an oh shit moment, and ends up being a kind of a murder that they weren't planning to kind of commit. In that scenario, most people, when they panic, when something like that happens, they go to areas for disposing the body that they know well or feel comfortable in. They feel comfortable they can navigate them. They feel comfortable they can navigate them without being seen. Most people are not going to feel comfortable just driving around with a body in their trunk for a long ways, which is why oftentimes when you look at these cases that are solved where they find the bodies, there's typically, there is a limited radius in which the person will be willing to drive around, right, with the body. They're not driving them 500 miles, right? Like it's typically within a set area, and it puts a lot of pressure on the person who's doing the transportation. And if this area, the border is like pretty close, like you're saying, it just makes you, it would maybe, I don't know if it changes who you're actually looking at in those areas, but it would provide at least some insight into exactly some of the possibilities, right? So we think about with the Gretchen Fleming case, Preston Pierce, he disposes of Gretchen Fleming in an area that was part of his patrol when he was a police officer. That's where he goes in that moment of, I don't think he was set out to murder Gretchen Fleming, right? In this moment where he does this thing, he goes someplace that he feels like he knows. And so I do think if we knew where Nancy Guthrie was, it would allow us to kind of work backwards in a slightly different way. But without even that information, I feel like there's so many missing pieces that it's really hard to have a confident opinion about anything except to say that if this was a planned as a murder, it's totally illogical, and it wasn't a very well planned murder, except for the fact that I guess the person has been caught, and it's hard to understand what the goal was. So
Yeah, and a part of me feels that the recent updates that have been coming out, I don't know if that's just the news networks trying to keep this in the news cycle,
Mhm.
because you've got things going on all the time with Iran and with the World Cup
Yeah.
and these other, just national news things that are happening. And it's very easy to forget that this case even happened. It's kind of like, oh, that hasn't been solved yet.
Right. And does it surprise you they're not that law enforcement is not speaking about it, like, more consistent? At the very beginning, there's press
I don't
conferences
think
every
they
single
have
day.
anything.
Okay, because that was my question. I'm wondering about if the key to solving this is a piece of information they don't have that they believe someone in that community or area is likely to possess. You think you would be doing everything you could just to keep it out there, that you're going to catch that person or find some way to appeal to that person, or someone will eventually come forward, right?
Right.
But I feel like a case like this, that where someone's so prominent, they've spared no expense in terms of resources, right, that are available for the investigation. They're not shortchanging the investigation. I'm just wondering, 4 months in, it feels like we're reaching that space where if they're not talking about it, I wonder if the celebrity status almost works against this case, where it becomes okay, so it's not solved, but like lots of celebrity news that could kind of get
Right.
fall into, the cycle for it is kind of past.
Well, and what I do think that will solve this case is the only thing that they haven't been able to release, and that's what's going on with the DNA.
Yeah,
We know that or we believe that they have DNA in this case. We know that they mentioned that the FBI
yeah.
is the lab that is handling it, which is great. But people need to realize that also does not happen overnight.
It's gonna take a very long time.
Right. And so this may
So
be, especially if the profile is not in CODIS.
mhm,
I mean, this could be years down the road of waiting for either someone to be entered into CODIS so this guy
yeah,
does it again and gets arrested,
yeah.
or that other leads are developed and they go after the suspect and get his DNA. But if
For a
we are
one-to-one comparison, yeah.
right,
Mhm.
which is this is very time consuming and takes a lot of resources to do, because you can't just go around and guess for
Yeah,
years about who this person is in hopes that, the discarded cigarette butt that you got from them, or you're going around and swabbing everyone's mouth and then processing all those buccal swabs. Like, that's time and resources. And with departments like the FBI,
mhm.
other cases are going to take a priority. And the cases that get priority are the ones that have active leads. And this one seems to be currently, I think we're just in a waiting period.
Well, we talked before about very early on this case, they announced they would be doing investigative genetic genealogy, which is what we're talking about, where you're not using a one-to-one comparison. But what makes it so time consuming and what people might not understand is this is like doing dense historical, a combination of dense historical research and kind of scientific kind of genome work, where imagine going back a few hundred years and then kind of having to build that family tree forward, isolating it to second or third cousins and slowly kind of making your way. Now, if they have a good sample, there is a strong likelihood that they will eventually make their way down that family tree over whatever period of time to the suspect. I think the whole thing in this one is complicated. Is just like with other pieces of evidence that they found before in the past and that were ultimately not useful. Investigative genetic genealogy is only going to be especially useful if we know for sure that that DNA belongs to the killer, that you're spending all that time kind of building
Right.
forward. And now, if you've collected a lot of random things from the crime scene, you think, well, we think some of this is likely the killer. Well, I mean, I'm assuming they're not doing investigative genetic genealogy on every piece of DNA that they found. Like, that would be, I'll be, I don't, well, I'm not even gonna say how old I would be by the time that's done. That would just wouldn't make sense. And I just can't imagine agency being okay with that. So they have to have a reasonable degree of certainty, usually to do investigative genetic genealogy, that the DNA actually belongs to the person who's responsible, right?
Right. I mean, a lot of
Um,
times you're pulling that from the victim's body
right.
or from the victim's clothing. And you're right. With this, we know that the suspect was wearing gloves.
Yeah.
And so,
What you don't want is you don't want to spend years building a complex tree and working its way down to, and you discover you have the DNA of the gardener who had a right to be there, who worked there every day.
well, we already did that with the
Yeah.
glove fiasco when they were doing the search of the property
Yeah.
and they found like 70 gloves or something. It was something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the one glove that they thought was the suspect's
Mhm.
ended up being a hairdresser in the area
Right. Yeah.
that just discarded a glove. So,
I mean,
no.
there's no exact timetable. I mean, I get to give people a sense of this. There was a case from Alaska from 1996. It was solved, I think, around 2020. It was solved in 2023 with investigative genetic genealogy. But that was a case where they similarly had no leads, but they had an expectation. The victim was raped and murdered, and they had an expectation that investigative genetic genealogy would be a tool that would produce the killer, because the DNA they had, they openly said, was from semen taken from the victim. So, and they were eventually able to figure out who that was, but it took a very, very long time going that route. And in that particular case, the individual had never committed any other known crime, at least, and was not in the CODA system or any of the other databases. And so it is an incredibly valuable tool, but you're going to need a really good DNA sample, and you're asked for investigative genetic genealogy, but you're also going to want to be sure before you start that there is a strong preponderance of evidence that this DNA actually belongs to the person who's responsible. Otherwise, it's a tremendous waste of time and resources.
Yeah. And one of the shows I did was with Troy Hillman,
Mhm.
who was the sergeant of a homicide in the canal murders in Arizona. And they were actually the first ones to use genetic genealogy.
Mhm.
And during that case, they had literally I think it was like 4 filing cabinets
Jeez.
full of files with suspects packed in. And, they worked for years and years going through this and traveling all around the country, re-interviewing people.
Mhm.
And then genetic genealogy came about, and they were able to get enough information from that to be able to get a possible last name,
Mhm.
and some relatives. But it's not like a name pops up and it's like, "This is
Right.
your offender." Like, you've
Yeah.
still got to do a lot of legwork, and that's one of the things that they worked on. They were eventually able to find the suspect. So genetic genealogy is more pointing you in the right direction and giving you a clue. At the same thing with Golden State. We've
Right.
had with Joseph D'Angelo,
Hmm.
where Julia Cali worked that case. She's been on the show several times. And with that, again, it's not this is your guy. This is a family tree that is related to your offender. And you've got to work
Right.
through that and figure out who that is, and then eventually get a DNA sample from them, whether it's voluntarily or going secret squirrel on them and finding something they've discarded.
It also creates potential in this particular case when we're talking about like border towns, it creates weird jurisdictional issues. Suppose you go through a genetic genealogy and you say, okay, so this person like is family or these are people likely live in this region of Mexico. Like what do you do? What
And
do you do with
right.
like the FBI is not going to have jurisdiction in Mexico, right? There'd have to be some special arrangement with the government. It'd be a more complex kind of dynamic than just we're going to fly down there and kind of start knocking on doors.
And I think that if they had enough, that wouldn't be such an issue. But
Mm.
you're right. That's one of the nightmare scenarios of you have DNA and it just goes into that pile of cases that, okay, this person is in CODIS and we don't have anything on it, and we're going to have to work this genetic genealogy aspect of it and spend years doing it. But I'm hoping that this person is local. That's my gut.
Mhm.
Is that this person knows the area, he lives relatively close by, and but the problem is that in the area that she is, there's a lot of desert, and we're
Yeah.
looking at 4 months. So even if this person put her in a shallow grave or put her in the desert, you've got to think about predation is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so we may not even be looking for a body at this point. It may be we're looking of signs that she was there. So unfortunately, pieces.
Yeah, I think it's one of the difficult things about kind of desert terrain like that. It's going to be very hard because of the turnover with the wind blowing, and it's not like there's gonna be like a trails or things to be followed at this point. Even if they were looking for signs of areas that were kind of disturbed, it's gonna be really hard to pick out months and months later in an area like that. So where the topography is going to change a little bit, right? Like as with weather and other things. And so I'm not really sure. I think it's going to make it really difficult. And so they've tried to focus. And I come back to the fact we still have this video, and it makes me wonder though how little they actually have when part of the news that comes out about the case. One of the recent updates, as we're talking about tonight, was there have been all these different people like arrested for hanging around outside the house that they openly admit were not tied to the abduction. It's like, then why is that freaking news? Like, why? Why is that the news update? That you've arrested people that have nothing to do with the case that were in the proximity
Right.
of the house?
Yeah, you're referring to the YouTubers that were essentially trying to do a show from the property. And then when they were told that they can't be there,
Yeah.
a few of them didn't want to leave. And one of them, I believe, uh, like
Such,
pushed one of the sergeants down
such a bad
that was
idea.
at the scene. Yeah. It's just pure stupidity. And that's the error problem is that the celebrity status becomes
Yeah.
it creates just fools coming out and just doing these stupid things, as well as just tips that are going to flood in that
Yeah.
require manpower and are going to be completely baseless, like the whole Mexico thing. I don't.
Well, but even given that Mexico tip, right? It seems very unlikely to me as well. But given that Mexico tip, though, it's surprising to me that the sheriff has really insisted, and I don't know if this is still the case right now, but for a long period in this case, the sheriff has really kind of maintained the jurisdiction and kind of maintained the actual like leadership over this case in terms of the primary jurisdiction, and the FBI has had to go along with whatever kind of not necessarily like quite crazy whim he has, but he's the person that's just directing the investigation, right?
Right.
And it does make you wonder if we're even considering like essentially a transnational component with kind of this like international dimension with Mexico and everything. Like, does your county really have the resources to investigate a case like that big? Or if they do you want to be spending your resources investigating that case when the FBI seems to be more kind of tailor made to handle a case of that kind of size? With the kind of just managing the lead seems like it would be a very big strain on a department that I'm sure already has like being closer to the border, a lot of other crap to deal with.
Yeah. And that's something that
Like, why would you want it? That was the
you know,
upside to
right.
having that case.
And we
So,
mentioned Gretchen Peterson,
or
and
Fleming,
I
yeah.
think that was
Mhm,
a great example of that. You've got a smaller department
mhm,
that checked their ego at the door right from the get go, got the FBI involved.
mhm.
The department, their detectives worked with the family very closely. But I mean, they were working with the FBI, the US Marshals,
Yeah.
the Attorney General's office, and it was just this combined effort
Mhm.
that everyone did their part, and they didn't say, "Okay, we're going to follow this guy, around Asheville, or we wanna be a part of that," or the FBI, I know, was doing, the processing during the search warrants.
Mhm.
You didn't have the small department trying to do that. They let the experts do their job,
Yeah.
and I think that when you have cases like this, for a sheriff, it's very easy to look at it at first as, "Oh, man, I solved this. That's immediate
Right.
reelection,"
Right.
right?
This
I mean,
election,
you've
yeah.
got the high profile case that's going around the country. You solve it, you can get elected year after year because 'cause you're the guy that saved the day or brought
Yeah.
closure to the family, whatever it is.
Write a
But,
book about it or whatever, yeah.
oh, yeah, book deal,
Documentaries,
Netflix
yeah.
is calling. You're
Yeah.
good. But on the flip side of that,
Mhm.
if you mess it up,
It's it's a different story. Comes a
exactly.
comes a
And that's what
cautionary
blows
tale.
me away, that when you've got agencies like the FBI
Yeah.
who have labs that are extremely sophisticated, and you're like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm gonna use my lab in Florida," and
Or Arizona, yeah. Mhm.
right, I thought
Mhm.
they were using, okay, maybe I'm wrong on that.
Mhm.
But regardless, it just seems that you'd want your best players in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you
Hand
would be saying, "You know what? I want the FBI to process this. You use your state of the art lab. I want the, behavioral unit to come in, and let's get a profile done of what this offender, um, what his likely traits are, and to have something to work off of." And hopefully they've done those things, because if you're at nothing, if you're
right.
just waiting around for the phone to ring, when it's ringing, that's great, but when the phone stops, then, you're left where you're at now.
Well, the only thing worse than kinda keeping I think it's such a high risk, strategy to keep it yourself and to kind of publicly maintain control of it yourself, doing all the press conferences and things like that. And if you imagine that that's the strategy, the only thing worse than that would be handing it over to the FBI too late after you've perhaps made some mistakes that's going to make it more difficult for them to help catch you up eventually. So, you don't want to create a scenario, and I'm not saying they've done this, for I don't know what they have or do not have that has not been released publicly. It just seems likely that based on the way this case has been handled so far, if there was some kind of smoking gun or significant evidence, it doesn't seem like the sheriff out there has been especially shy about alluding to that. And so it
Right.
makes me wonder that there's not a lot. And if there's not a lot, the longer you're sitting on this, it's not, these cases are not like wine. They are not going to get better with age. And eventually you're going to run into an issue where if you do attempt to hand it off to another agency, you don't want them to be in a position where they're starting really, really far behind.
Yeah, and I think you're right too that if they had something like Justin was bringing up in the comments earlier about
Yeah.
another video, a security tape, a description of the car,
Mhm.
I think we'd have that by now.
I'm just surprised too. I'm wondering how many people have like turned in their neighbors or other things because we do have enough video where, like I'm thinking about again with like Delphi, there were like all these tips coming in. People like,
Right.
oh, he kind of looks like this guy I saw in the bar, kind of walks like this other person. There were all those tips coming in, and I don't know the exact number of tips they've had to follow up on. I'm sure it's considerable, but it does make me wonder like how many, because this video is like pretty clear, we can, unless this was an outfit specifically for his occasion, someone like, oh, that, whether it's the body type or the clothes wearing, like that kind of looks like
Right.
this guy I work with or something else.
Which is what happened in Delphi once they released the video, is you had
Mhm.
people come forward. All right, Zappa has a good point. What about the cameras inside Nancy House's failed to record anything the night she went missing?
I don't understand that either. Yeah.
So I'm wondering what kind of camera system that was too, and was it all on one system? Were these things old, or did the offender do something? And I think that if the offender had put that much work into it, where
Mhm.
before he went in, he's taking out the camera system and doing those aspects, taking out the alarm system,
Mhm.
then that would make me lead to believe that this is not the crackhead or meth head that's trying to steal a stereo system. Um, but I don't know. I mean, it could be that that camera system hasn't worked for a while. Um, and I think that I really hope that they've got more footage than what they've released.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think given that he didn't seem that concerned with being caught on camera in the way that he actually was, I think it's a great question about what other camera footage of this person there is. If he was that unconcerned when he's on camera there, if there are other cameras around the house or inside the house, it seems like there's a likelihood that, short of being very proficient, like you're saying, more of a professional style hit or some kind of specialized knowledge, whether it's whatever trade this person or career this person worked in or having some kind of specialized knowledge, it seems likely there's some audio or video or something else. And I do think if any of those things do exist, it would be smart to release. There are times where they withhold, like in Delphi, like you said, we got more of the audio, we got more of the video when this finally went to trial. But they also did steadily release other increasing little bits of it. And
Right.
we don't really have that here, which is really surprising because you would think living in an affluent neighborhood, having being the 84-year-old mother of a very prominent celebrity, that there would be some other kind of this individual be caught on other kind of security systems or nearby um, homes. Now, nearby, I realize is relative in this case. It's a very rural area, but going back, maybe caught on something else.
Yeah, and I wonder of how much time he actually spent outside the home,
Yeah.
because we know that he disabled the camera at 147, and I said it before, the pacemaker goes out at 228. And that's a relatively,
Quick.
I was going to say, long time.
147 and 228, you said?
Yeah, if you're going in there and you're just going to like go and steal stuff,
Well, you
and then
think
you're gonna, like, bust open a back door or
Mhm.
whatever window and you go in and you're grabbing crap and going. I mean, when people ransack homes like that, they don't
Mhm.
like neatly go through things. They'll grab a drawer when their goal is just to steal random crap and just rip it open. And whether they're looking for a pistol to sell or cash, they're
Mhm.
going to spots in the home where those items are normally located.
Mhm.
And so the intent is not to be there, very long because most people assume
Mhm.
that you have an alarm system.
Right. Right.
And so, like, we used to have kids all the time, especially around Christmas. They would walk through people's backyards
Mhm.
and they would just peer in the sliding glass door and see if they could see anyone. And if they couldn't see anyone, this is in broad daylight, they would take a chair and just bust
Crazy.
that door open
Fucking
and then
crazy.
run in and then grab just again, they're looking for like those easy to either sell items or
Mhm.
cash or pistols. And then they would just get out of there as quickly as possible. I realize that this is a rural area, but this is why I think that given the time frame,
Mhm.
um, yeah, this person took out the doorbell. I don't know if he did anything else to the security system or the cameras inside the house. If he cut some wires, and a lot of that stuff is remote or is wireless now too.
Right, and
But regardless,
you'd have to know where they were at too.
yeah. So that's why I would think that maybe it's just a camera issue that just never was fixed. But anyway, you're in that house relatively around two. I think that when this person was in the house,
Mhm.
that's when the confrontation happened. And I don't feel like this is a planned kidnapping. I think this was an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Oh, this old lady's home, and during that process, she got injured in some way, and whether he knew that she recognized him or whatever the reason was, he decides to take her with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think given that there wasn't stuff taken, right, that we know of from there,
Yeah, and
it
that's
seems like
what's
you
so hard is we don't know. Like, that would be nice to know.
right,
I would
or if
love
there
to
was
know
an
the
attempt to
condition
open
of that
something up.
house.
Yeah,
Like, I would
or
like to know when you walked into that house or
mhm,
walked into her bedroom, did you see those the dresser drawers pulled out? Is there's those obvious signs that someone is stealing something? Uh, do you remember the McStay family murder?
yeah,
Okay. With that, that was a kidnapping where
mhm,
the offender ended up putting them in the desert as well,
yeah,
in a shallow grave in the middle of nowhere. And with that too, you had things like food was left out, like the
yeah,
family was eating breakfast. There wasn't those obvious signs that someone their motive was to find something, right?
right,
Because even if you go in and you see someone and you hold them hostage, essentially, your goal is going to be, if you're goal oriented, is going to be to find that item or that prize that you believe is in the house. You're just holding them there as
mhm,
this is just one of the circumstances that you have to deal with. But I think in this case, it's so unique because he decided not to kill her in the home
right,
and leave her body, which is kind of odd because if your intent is to go in there and again steal something, and I feel like I'm talking around in circles right now, but if your intent is to go in there and steal something and Nancy is there, and whether she is fiery and
mhm,
you end up fighting an 84-year-old woman,
mhm,
or you are doing something to restrain her and she gets injured in the process,
mhm,
it is not a great idea to take her with you, because like we talked before, it's if you want to keep her alive, good luck. You better bring her medicine,
Mhm.
some medical equipment to help those wounds. You've got to feed her, give her water. You can't
Mhm.
just throw an 84-year-old in the closet, right?
Right.
And so it's almost odd that he doesn't, I hate to say it this way, but eliminate her then and just
Yeah,
leave her there.
and you would think if that was the case, then we would see more, like, evidence of the crime scene than a few drops of blood, like you said.
Right.
It almost makes me wonder if there was a scenario where this was a robbery, like you said, and he broke in. She's 84 years old, has a variety of different health issues where it's the end of a long night. She's maybe just gotten to bed, and it startles her or frightens her enough where it actually precipitates an actual medical emergency. And then he went in there to rob, and now he's got to deal with this, right?
Right.
And he loses all appetite to go through her stuff when he's dealing with this person having a medical emergency or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. She could have even faked a medical emergency, honestly, as a defense mechanism of saying like, "Oh, my heart, I've got a pacemaker," and
and this is where if there were cameras inside the house, like the commenter mentioned earlier, which I think is a good point, even you would think there would be some kind of audio of some kind there because I mean, given the time frame, and when I said it, I didn't think it was a lot of time. Um, I mean, it's not a lot of time if the person's kicking in the door and kind of going in like really fast, but he's not walking past the ring camera. He's not concerned with being on camera. He's not walking past the ring camera and just breaking in. He's taking the time to like tap it and like try to unscrew or do those things.
right.
I don't think he has enough time to do that once he gets in there, unless he doesn't know where they're at to begin with. It's dark in there. She's gone to bed. Right. And so I don't imagine he's going around turning on the lights, trying to find where the cameras are. And even if he was doing that, there would be some audio or something recorded prior to them going out, if there were any inside there. And if that footage or that audio does exist, where is it?
Right. I mean,
Or
the
does it?
cameras that we have inside our house, I've got
Mhm.
cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
And the ones that we can use to record inside, you have to set them up. Either you can turn them on with an app
Mhm.
to record right then, or you'd have to set it up for like a time frame. So if you were leaving your house, or we use them with our daughter sometimes when we're trying to keep an eye on her. And so you can either turn them on or you can schedule it. But there's not a reason just to let it run the entire day. And
Right.
so that may have been something that she had in her house,
Mhm.
but she just didn't use unless she was going on vacation or something.
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. I'm even wondering if there was, some older people with conditions if they live by themselves. We even have those like emergency call buttons, like they'll wear
Yeah,
around their like their. I don't know if she had anything like that, but you can imagine a scenario in which, if she did have something like that, that could have even been a way to get someone out there, let them know something's not right by pressing the kind of those I've fallen and I can't get up buttons that we used to see advertised
right.
so much. So,
And that kind of leads me to another point about what they may have. And we know that the pacemaker is trying to communicate with the house. I
mhm,
was just wondering, and I should have looked into this earlier.
yeah.
Is there a way to determine the direction that that signal's pulling from, kind of like a GPS,
That would be interesting. Yeah, there should be at least.
you know?
You think it would, yeah, it depends on what type of signal it would be, I guess. But yeah, that's an interesting question.
Because I mean, it's not going to stay connected,
Or like what is
but
the proximity? Yeah, where is
right,
it?
it would
Yeah,
be nice to know, like, okay, a direction of travel and when that signal went out.
almost like a human air tag kind of thing.
Well, yeah, because doctors can monitor those things,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like if you're having heart trouble and you've got a monitor, I mean, that is something
Mhm.
that they can pull up and monitor it the whole time. So even knowing when that monitor stops,
Mhm.
aka a time of death, I
Mhm.
would think that that would be something that they may know. I don't know.
Yep. That no, that would be certainly interesting to know. And I am wondering what other kinds of security they had there. Only, and I don't mean necessarily formal security, but even like the kind of emergency call button you can press if you fall or something like
Right.
that. Only because I'm imagining that it's just hard for me to imagine. Like I think about like our grandmother had things like that during her later years. And it's just hard to imagine someone who's affluent or tied to, his daughter's a celebrity having less resources than just regular people I know's grandparents. So,
Yeah. And that's hard to say if
I
that
mean,
is something that they just didn't think she needed, or I mean, we know that she went to dinner the night before with some family and they're
mhm,
dropping her off, and we know that she misses church, which is something that she normally doesn't do, which kind of causes this trigger. And that's important because when we look at the victimology side,
yeah,
we know this is someone that has a lot of people that care about her in her life.
right.
And so you would think, okay, um, this is this is not someone that's living in the middle of nowhere, and
Mhm,
it would be easy to approach her house in the daytime,
mhm,
or not have that neighbor that looks out for him. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, yeah, absolutely. I think that yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think you would think if there was, and even within the neighborhood, if there was like suspicious characters that were seen like, in the days before or weeks before, they were kind of walking around or something, or neighbors had spotted. I know like in our neighborhood, the people were like pretty nosy and that like if there's like like we don't really, it's not like a crime filled neighborhood, but if there's like anything like someone, oh, they went to put their groceries and they accidentally left their door open, which happened recently, like people will notice that and they'll go tell you. Like people are
Right.
kind of generally aware of kind of what's going on in their community and neighborhood, looking out for each other. And I'm just wondering if there was anything that was like obvious, like in the weeks before, that an individual matching this description was seen going around the houses, whatever, like she would have certainly known about that. And you would have made some precautions with that knowledge in mind. And so if there's nothing, it just makes you wonder, even given when this happened, was it timed where the person kind of was waiting for her to get back home because it was about her? Was it just coincidence in the when the person actually arrived there? Or yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. Was this about like property? Was this tied to her? Both of these are potential financial motives, but it's hard to know what to place the most weight on.
Yeah. I'll make one more point of why I don't think they have very much in this case, and that is that it's been 4 months and we do not have a neighbor going
Mhm.
on Instagram, TikTok,
Yeah.
the local news, uh, giving their testimony about how they saw the suspect as well and sharing that footage with them. You have not seen any of that.
Mhm.
And I don't, maybe it's my just personal belief that I would believe that if someone had something like that, they're not going to sit on it for, not when it's a person connected to this case. This is a big enough case where if you had a picture like that
Mhm.
and you go on social media, you're going on the Today Show, you're going on Dateline to talk about this.
Right.
That would be something that people take advantage of. And that hasn't happened, which makes me believe that the police don't have that either. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And also this is one of those where it's a high profile enough case where I feel like if someone had something because of all the attention like that it would bring, that they would be likely to come forward too. And some part of me wonders if this is a situation where some of these stories that are getting attention, I mean, is this really just about keeping this story in the news somehow, even if it's just there's no substance to it? Like, oh, there were some arrested some podcasters or something outside the house and they interviewed the arresting officer or whatever. Like, is it on some small level, is that just about reminding people this case is still out there and is kind of going on? Or because some of these updates just seem like just total nonsense.
Right. No, I completely agree. Well, let's wrap this up. I think something that's not nonsense is this book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor of the Cop in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. I wrote that with my brother, Dr. Brian Santana. This is about the murder of Virginia Marie Olson on the campus of UNC Asheville in 1973. That case is still unsolved. Make sure you pick that up. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Audible, so you can listen to it anywhere where you can buy a book. Dr. Brian, you've got another book coming out too.
Yeah, another book that's in the pipeline, probably sometime next year. This is A Murder in Niceville, about the Deborah Elizabeth Espy story. It's another it was a cold case from 1973 that was actually solved. So it was so that way it's a very unique story, but I'm working with the History Press on that, and some deadlines coming up next week and then later in July. So that I'll have a lot more about that book to share pretty soon.
All right. Well, if you'd like to support the channel, you can start by liking and subscribing to Santana True Crime. You can now become a member too for $1.99 a month. You can support the channel. What you get for that is you get the content before anyone else, to include some shorts, and we'll do some members only updates to keep you informed of what is going on. Speaking of which, I'll give you one for free Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Jason Blair from the Silver Lining Handbook is going to be coming on. We're going to be talking about the Ashley Loring heavy runner case. It's listed as a missing person case, even though I'm sure it's a murder. Also joining us is now retired Chicago homicide detective Michelle Wood. Michelle has an incredible book that just came out through Wild Blue as well, called Model Detective. It's got some great true crime stories. Some are funny, some are sad. She's got an incredible life. So make sure you check all that out, and hopefully you will join us then. Brian, thank you again for joining me.
Anytime.
And good night.
Night, everyone.